Welcome to Comic Chop News. I'm Dan, and today we're going to be discussing and reviewing the 1996 slasher film, Scream. So, to start out, I just want to talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff of Scream and also the importance of the movie. Kevin Williamson wrote this script. It was originally titled Scary Movie and stayed that title up until almost the Rap Party, where Bob Weinstein all of a sudden was inspired by the Michael Jackson song that was big at the time called Scream, and he decided that they needed to change that. The Weinsteins were heavily involved from the beginning with this script. They were in a bidding war with Oliver Stone for it. There were some kerfuffles over dailies where they didn't like what was coming back, and we're talking about removing Wes Craven from the movie. And talking about Wes Craven, Wes Craven had turned down the movie originally and then ended up coming back once Drew Barrymore, of all people, attached herself to it, which she caused also trouble because they're getting ready to start, and she's like, well, I don't want to be Sidney anymore. I'd rather be Casey and die at the beginning. So there was a whole bunch of mitigating factors going on with this. And it's amazing that it turned out as well as it did. Even the mask they had trouble with, and then had to find Fun World and get them to license it with them. But so as for the movie's importance, so in 1996 when this came out, the slasher genre was in a bad place. I think Curse of Michael Myers had just come out somewhere around then. And Jason had pretty much wrapped up what was going on with him. I think Ted Goes to Hell had come out already. It had fallen off with the general public. Horror in general for a while, like at least in the main theaters, just wasn't really there at that point in time. And this movie came out while homaging Halloween and, kind of being very meta about the genre as a whole. We end up getting this movie that Bob Weinstein also had pushed to come out at Christmas as kind of counter-programming, where it came out, it did okay, not great, but then word of mouth started week after week. It actually was one of the ones that went up every week. So the Weinsteins were kind of very intelligent with what they did with counter-programming at Christmas. But again, like, Kevin Williamson wrote a very smart script. The ghost face imagery was enough to create kind of a phenomenon of a character. You had a heroine in it, in Sidney Prescott, who had a bit of the Laurie Strode in her. She might have been a little bit more fierce than Laurie was, but there was this, I wouldn't even say innocence. There was something there that, like a vulnerability that made you like gravitate to her. Actually, most of the characters were written very interesting. It's weird because I just watched it again the other night, and I found myself gravitating to Stu this time, where in the past it was like Randy was the one that always caught my eye, but I think I've grown to appreciate Matthew Lillard's acting a little bit more and, what he was able to evoke in this. So those are just some of my thoughts about the movie and what it meant and kind of the background info on what was going on. So the movie starts and Drew Barrymore answers the phone, and it's a wrong number. This goes on a couple of times, and then she's popping popcorn. And, each time she answers the phone, the conversation goes a little bit more. This time she says, she's getting ready to watch a movie, and says a scary movie. So they start going to this back and forth about what's your favorite scary movie. And the conversation, while innocent, all of a sudden turns to, I want to see who I'm looking at. So, of course, she freaks out and hangs up. And from there, we start one of the greatest cold opens to a movie, a horror movie, just fantastic. and it's a chase through the house, the cat and mouse. And it's one of those ones that, like, it sticks in your brain. Her parents come home, she still has the cordless phone, and they hear her getting murdered. And the father, here's an homage to Halloween, where he's like, I need you to go to the Mackenzies, which Laurie tells little Tommy Doyle to go to the Mackenzies' house. And as she walks out the house to go, there is Drew Barrymore, her daughter Casey, strung up, hanging from the tree with her guts hanging out. Also, funny fact, this scene and another scene later on where they said, films don't make people crazy, don't make killers, they make killers better. The MPAA had a horrible time with this, and they barely got an R rating. Bob Weinstein actually called and said that the movie was a comedy and somehow got them to lower it down to an R. Another little interesting factoid. So after this death, we cut to Sidney and meet her for the first time, and Skeet Ulrich, playing Billy, shows up for the first time at her window, saying that, he just watched The Exorcist and, was thinking about their relationship. A lot of the things, they talk horror movie references quite a bit in this movie. And again, if you speak the language, you're just like, oh yeah. So we get a little bit of info into their relationship. And from there, we go to the next day at school where, it's become the media blitz because of the deaths and finding out what happens. We meet Henry Winkler, who is the principal of the school, and also we get Tatum Riley, who is Sid's best friend, played by Rose McGowan. We also find out that Sidney's mom had been murdered the year before, and she had put away the guy who she saw leaving his house, who was framed, spoiler, Cotton Weary, played by Liv Schreiber. We also meet at the school this day Randy, who is the film nerd, Stu, Billy's best friend, and we kind of learn a little bit about them. Stu and Randy are super glib, and they're having conversations about, how they were asked if they liked hunting. And they start making jokes about, did you really find her spleen in the mailbox? And Stu saying, live her alone, live her alone. Dumb stuff. It was just kind of funny. And again, it was written in a way that even if you weren't in the horror genre, it was kind of smart-assy that you kind of got what was going on. From there, we meet Gale Weathers also, who at the time Courteney Cox was one of the biggest stars on TV, and that always kind of was interesting that she ended up becoming the super bitch of the movie, basically. After that, Sid goes home and takes a nap, and she starts getting the ghost face calls, who she constantly thinks is Randy, until he says he's not Randy. Chase goes on around the house, and she's attacked. She fights back, and she manages to get upstairs, and one of the weirdest things for that time period was able to call 911 on a dial-up connection on her computer and have them there right away. But as she opens the door, Billy's there, setting up the red herring aspect of the movie. Throughout the whole movie, they set up the red herring where, is it Billy, is it someone else? And in the background in certain places, you'll continually see Ghostface in the background or in a reflection like in a grocery store. It's set up pretty brilliantly when you think about it. Shot very well. I mean, Wes Craven's always been a great director. after the whole police department scene where Billy's being interrogated and Sidney's there, he gets kept there. And Sid's staying at Tatum's house, and her brother Dewey, played by David Arquette, is there. He's kind of played like a dumbass, basically. He's basically the Barney Fife of town. And she receives a call, and it's Ghostface. So Billy gets released because Ghostface called, and while he was under interrogation. And she comes back to school. People are running around in Ghostface masks. And the principal, Henry Winkler, I forget what the principal's name is in it, but he has an intense scene where he's got these sharp scissors and he's kind of using in a threatening manner towards the kids running around, and he expels them. Sid gets attacked by Ghostface in the bathroom, kind of just randomly. There's Dewey and Gale interactions, which, this movie set up their marriage in real life. And Stu decides it's a great time to throw a party night. There's a curfew, and there's a whole bunch of montages around the town, and Nick Cave's Red Right Hand plays throughout the movie in several scenes, and I think was part of the very fitting song, and it became very popular, especially with the kind of organ beat to it. The principal is killed. Wes Craven also makes his appearance in it, playing Fred the janitor, wearing the red and green sweater and a hat. We also get a scene with Randy at work at his video store. Everybody's coming in getting horror movies. And Stewie and Billy are there, and Stu and Randy get into a conversation, and a little bit of back and forth, and how it's messed up that Billy's accused of murder and hanging out in the horror section. And Stu starts going, well, what if it's Sid's dad? And it has Randy go on a rant about how everyone's a suspect.
They find her pops, man.
Because he's probably dead. His body will come popping up in the last reel somewhere. Eyes gouged out, fingers cut off, teeth knocked out. See, the police are always off track with this shit. If they'd watch Prom Night, they'd save time. There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
Causing everybody in the video store to turn around. And then we see the dark side of Billy really come out, where he confronts Randy and they have a back and forth. It's pretty good. So from there, we then get Stu's house, which is the biggest freaking house I've ever seen. It's gorgeous. And this is the party scene. And pretty much every kid in high school feels like they're there. Dewey is there chaperoning outside, making sure nothing happens. Gale sneaks on following them. It was called Scene 118, which supposedly was the longest shoot of the whole entire movie. Pretty much the whole end of the movie takes place during this. And Billy shows up. Everybody's drinking. Billy and Sid go upstairs, where she decides she's going to make love to him. And then we get what everybody remembers Randy for: the rules of surviving a horror movie.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
So after he goes through the rules, they find out the principal has been killed and he's hanging from a flagpole. So everybody gets in their cars and leaves. And that's when Ghostface... Well, prior to this, Ghostface has already killed Tatum. Tatum died in one of the weirdest scenes ever that I've seen in a horror movie, where she gets cut a little bit, and then she tries to go through the cat door in the garage door. And it sounds like when the garage door turns on that a high-powered turbine came on to raise it, and it ends up killing her. I'd say it's probably one of the more stupid deaths in the series. So that was kind of goofy, but whatever. It's a horror movie. You know, you got to kind of look past some of that crap. After Sid and Billy have gotten together, she starts asking him who he'd called, and he says his father. She's like, oh, well, I was there. The police called your dad. He's like, oh, yeah, well, I couldn't get a hold of him. And then Ghostface comes out and stabs him. And the chase through the house starts with Sid again. And as she's running around, she goes out the door and then sees Randy and Stu both coming in. They're both, you know, kind of blaming each other as being the killer. She locks them out. And Stu ends up getting back in. We also have Billy come out, and he's, you know, looks like he's all bloody, but then he reveals that it's corn syrup. And from there, the villain monologue starts of why they're doing it. His dad had an affair with her mother, and it broke up his family, so he basically, him and Stu hatched the plan to kill her, and then a year after that decided that they were going to continue with the killing, and they were going to frame her dad. And this, I feel, is where Matthew Lillard really earns his money in this movie, because he is overacting and over-dramatizing so much. And we have the scene where, to make it look like they're survivors from her father who they're trying to frame, they stab each other. And Lillard's going, "You cut me too deep. I'm feeling a little woozy." And they get so involved with everything that they kind of lose track of what's going on around them. I mean, it's kind of the insanity of it, where at one point Gale gets the gun, but she forgets to turn the safety off, and they get the drop on her. But while all that's going on, Sidney gets away, and she has the voice vocoder and the cell phone, and she calls and starts taunting them, and that she called the police. Billy starts rampaging. She calls him a mama's boy. He throws the phone at Stu, and Stu has one of the greatest lines. I don't know why I love it so much, but it's just fantastic. And Billy's just rampaging through the house looking for both Stu and Billy both get into several confrontations with Sid. Sid gets the drop on Stu, and we then get the final confrontation with Billy, and Gale ends up saving the day pretty much. Fantastic movie. It moves really fast. The pacing is really good. When it does slow down, it slows down on purpose. Of course, this movie then breeds several bad imitations of it afterward. But on the one hand, I was happy because this movie inspired Jamie Lee Curtis to kind of approach to be in Halloween H2O, and wanted Kevin Williamson to write and John Carpenter to direct. Of course, John Carpenter wanted, I want to say, $10 million to direct, because he felt he was owed. So that didn't quite happen. Love or hate Halloween H2O, this was kind of a catalyst for it coming back and jump-starting the slasher genre. We also got the law of diminishing returns also from this movie, where Kevin Williamson became a hot name and couldn't put the work and effort really into part 2. And it was just diminishing returns until part 4. Part 4 I really enjoyed, and I will get to doing a review of that movie. The sum of all parts in this movie, I think, is what makes it great. And much like any movie, sometimes the limitations being brought to you and the struggles you have can sometimes make the movie better because you had to struggle to make it. And from everything I've seen in the Still Screaming documentary, and then the inside story on Scream, there was a lot of nonsense going on in the background between like the place they were scouting. The school board in town were like, no, we don't want you there. So then, they had to do another scouting location. They even get kind of a shout out in the credits of the town that kicked them out. Just fantastic. And again, Kevin Williamson, this was his big entrance into Hollywood. This script was his calling card. The witty dialogue. And again, if you don't have these actors in it, I don't know if this movie works, especially Stu, Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, and even Skeet Ulrich. Skeet Ulrich had that Johnny Depp, if he was playing evil constantly, he kind of had that look, but with just a dark side to him. My review for the movie is an 8 out of 10. There are a couple of things that stop it from being a perfect movie. Well, a lot of things, but there is no way to undersell how important this movie was to the genre, though. The genre was in need of a jump start, and yes, it did create these pale imitations afterward and kind of stunted the growth of the slasher genre for a while. But again, it did bring it back in a time where it was not good for horror in general. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share, let me hear your thoughts on the movie, and I will probably be doing The Dead Don't Die this coming week. And of course, if you're into comic books, I have my Long Box Paradox show on Wednesdays and Sundays. Wednesdays reviews, Sundays previews for the upcoming Wednesday. Thank you, goodbye.